Good afternoon, everyone. So I am going to present the examination of central nervous system today. So the neurological examination is considered by many to be very lengthy, or it is tedious, time consuming, overly detailed and all. But in reality, the examination is quite simple, because when performing the neurological examination, it is important to keep the purpose of the examination in mind, namely to localize the lesion. A basic knowledge of neuroanatomy is necessary to interpret the examination. So in the last class, we have dealt about the neuroanatomy while Ambika explained it to us. So the key to performing any efficient neurological examination is observation. So here we can, through this slides, today we can learn or pick up those skills which are necessary for us to do a central nervous examination. Because in all cases we need not do a detailed examination, because we already know, or we can pinpoint the lesion through the history itself or through the presentation, not detailed enough to do the examination every time. But it is always better to do that, because if we have missed out any points, we can pick those points while doing the proper detailed examination. So through the neurological assessment helps to identify which component of the neurological system are affected. If possible, determine the precise location of the problem, and screening for the presence of discrete abnormalities in patients at risk for the development of neurological disorders. So then the three questions of neurological diagnosis, this is very important. Which are the three important ones? So is there a lesion, presence of neurological abnormality, and second one, where is the lesion, location of the problem and requires the knowledge of neuroanatomy, and third one, what is the lesion. So because we can divide this in neurological diagnosis can be divided into two types, that is anatomic and etiological. So through that we can actually learn different types of lesions. Lesions of sudden onset are typically due to vascular accidents such as stroke, for example, and slowly progressive lesions are there. Lesions with exaggerating and remitting courses, that is repeating courses, can be there, or relentlessly progressive lesions can also be there. So in the neurological examination, it is always important, and the prime factor is to take into consideration these three questions. Is there a lesion, where is the lesion, and what is the lesion. So we take history in every patient, whether it involves a gastrointestinal system or reproductive system, any system it might be. But in nervous, when we are doing the neurological examination, there are some extra points that we need to take care of while taking the history. Here we have the list like name, age, sex, gender, address, occupation, etc. But handedness, we would have not given that much importance in any other system in the examination. But when we are doing the CNS examination, it is always important to take care of handedness. We have to mention right hand or left hand. Then there are some key points which we have to clarify as per the symptom is concerned. So what are all the problems? For each symptom we have to describe the onset, duration, course, severity, precipitating factors and relieving factors. These are all the normal things we do, but there are some other things which are very important when we are coming to CNS examination. That is, like in mental status, we are going to ask for some symptoms, changes in the memory or mood. We might not be asking in any of the other systems. And coming to motor function, history of muscular weakness, this also we might not have asked. So in sensory function, numbness, tingling, each and every, the minutest component or the minutest symptom that the patient may suffer from or may notice from, we have to take into consideration. Though not in any other system, but in nervous system, each and every tiny point is very important. So it is better we don't miss those points. Then in the history taking part also, so the neurological history and physical examination are the most important tools in the neurological diagnosis. So we have to also give importance to the past medical history and the history is often the only way of diagnosing the neurological illness that typically have normal or non-focal findings on the neurological examination, because in most cases, even without taking a CT or MRI, we can pinpoint where is the lesion to some extent. Like 70 to 80% of the cases we can actually get through the history and proper examination only. So history taking and the proper performance of the examination is very important. And past medical history, like some of the drug history may be there. Like for example, in Parkinsonism is a frequent complication of metoclopramide and most neuroleptic agents. So like neuroleptic agents, also known as the antipsychotics, can reduce confusion, delusions, hallucinations, etc. So so we have to take care of the drug history also. We should not neglect that. And the occupation also plays a major role in various neurological disorders such as the carpal tunnel syndrome and peripheral neuropathy. So with this background, I would like to say that history taking plays a very important role in the neurological examination. So please give due importance to neurological examination history taking part. Just don't go with the normal flow how we take the history, but give some importance to handedness, drug history and occupational history in detail. And this is a common ideology that chronological sequence have to be given importance. Okay, so the CNS examination starts from the first impression when the patient enters the room itself. So moving from door to chair, how the patient's attitude is, how the patient's gait is, and size and shape of the patient, mode of the dress he wears, the hair, on sitting down, how his attitudes are, like checking for the involuntary movement, tremor, tic movements, etc. And how the patient sits on the chair, then the face, what are all the faces he make, and the voice. So all this is important. So first impression is always the best impression in which we can take few points even before examining the patient. So basically the examiner who is examining the patient has to be always alert while doing the neurological examination. Then systemic inquiry key questions are there. So this I will send you the PPT, you can go through this. So systemic inquiry questions like loss of consciousness, when and all he had some episodes, or loss or gain of weight and appetite, weakness having in limbs. So it is like that. So being Ayurveda students, we have, I think we have a upper side in doing this, because we can also recognize the brain system in which way they are. Like this is from an article, Vata brain type and Pitta brain type and Kapha brain type. How we can recognize and how it can help us in understanding the patient, and any complex thing which is there, we can understand it, or we can make it in a simplified way and we can understand that lesion. So with these understanding, Vata, Pitta and Kapha, we can actually recognize how the patient mood is, or how the patient reacts to any circumstances like that. Then the functions of the brain, because this is important while we are doing the cranial nerve examination part also. This is very important, because where the lesion, to localize the lesion, we need to know which part of the brain functions for which action. Okay, so now coming to the techniques of examination. Basically the techniques of examination involves 7 or 8 categories. So in that, important areas of examination are the mental status examination, cranial nerve examination from 1 to 12, motor system, sensory system, reflexes, assessment of special cerebral functions, coordination, gait and station. Special mentions are some of the lesions in skull, spine and meninges. What can go wrong in skull, spine and meninges. So in this slide, in this PPT, I am going to explain about the mental status examination and also the cranial nerve examination part. So before going to any examination, it is always important that before entering the exam hall, we keep these things ready. So the equipments needed are, in general, we need stethoscope, sphygmomanometer, thermometer, a pen torch. And coming specifically to the neurological examination, we have to keep ready reflex hammers, then tuning fork. Be careful not to choose the 128 Hz, because in both Rene's and Weber's test we are using 512 Hz tuning fork. And ophthalmoscope, pocket eye chart, cotton swabs, tongue blades, and safety pins, and also if you can carry a coin, and recognizable and not offensive substances. Like for checking the olfactory nerve, you shouldn't carry some offensive odors, but the very usual ones like coffee, or you can carry the lemon, like that. So these are the things which you need to carry in a before performing the neurological examination. So the first step we are going to do now is the mental status examination. Mental status examination has 5 to 6 components. Like it can be divided into 5 parts. The first is consciousness, level of alertness, focal cortical functioning, cognition, mood and affect, and the thought content. But as we explain through this mental status examination, we get to know that there are many more components which are to be included in mental status examination. But in brief, these are the main 5 parts which are included. I repeat: level of alertness, focal cortical functioning, cognition, mood and affect, and the thought content. So coming to the levels of consciousness, I am sure you know that we normally categorize it as 5 levels of consciousness. So the assessment of levels of consciousness includes the alertness, lethargic, stuporous, semi-comatose and comatose. Level of alertness is defined as the best verbal and motor response that can be elicited from the patient in response to a specific stimulus. Keeping this in mind, we categorize it into 5 parts. So in the alert state, patient is awake, responds immediately and appropriately to verbal stimuli. It is not just the immediate response, it should also be an appropriate response. Then lethargic state, patient is drowsy and inattentive but arouses easily, frequently off to sleep. Then stuporous, he arouses with great difficulty and cooperates minimally when stimulated. Then coming to semi-comatose, the patient has lost his ability to respond to verbal stimuli. There is some response to painful stimuli and little motor function is also seen. So here the verbal component is getting reduced much more, but only the painful stimulus part, it can work still. In comatose, when the patient is stimulated, there is no response to verbal or painful stimuli. No motor activity is seen, and the Glasgow Coma Scale, I'll go through that further in the coming slides. Glasgow Coma Scale is widely used to measure the patient's level of consciousness. So what our brain needs to tell that there is this patient is conscious? 2 neutral structures are required for consciousness. So the brainstem reticular activating system and 1 cerebral hemisphere is enough. So thus a patient is in unconsciousness if injury has occurred to both cerebral hemispheres or to the brainstem reticular activating system. So there is also a word which is used called as obtundation. The patient is difficult to arouse and needs constant stimulation to follow even a simple command. There we can also use a word called as obtundation. So now coming to Glasgow Coma Scale, how do we remember the Glasgow Coma Scale? Because every time we cannot carry a chart with us. So EVM, that's how I remember it. So E is eyes, V is verbal and M is motor response. So eyes open. Totally in the Glasgow Coma Scale there are 15 scores. In that 7 to 8 minimum we have to get. Anything below 7 to 8 is considered to be abnormal and there are some serious problems, serious issue within our nervous system. Anything more than that, like higher than 8, is said to be the okay types. So eyes open spontaneously, you give 4 score. To speech, if the eye he or she opens his eye, then to speech we give score as 3, to pain 2, none 1. Then the best verbal response, if the patient is oriented properly to the time, everything, then the score would be 5. If the patient is confused, then 4. Inappropriate words 3, and incomprehensive sounds, that is 2. Inappropriate, I think you know the difference between inappropriate words and the incomprehensive words, incomprehensive sounds. Inappropriate is whatever we ask, the reply will not be of the same context, but in incomprehensive words, sounds, the patient would be speaking something, would be making some sounds, but it doesn't make any sense. Then best motor response, obeys the commands, localizes the pain, and flexion withdrawal, abnormal flexion 3 points, abnormal extension 2 points, flaccid 1. So in total, the patient should get points above 8. Anything below 8 or below 7 would be considered as abnormal. I won't get into the details. I'll just say about the different classifications which come under this. Because in focal cortical functioning, mainly we have aphasia, apraxia and agnosia. In aphasia, it is an acquired disorder in the production or understanding the language due to a lesion involving the dominant cerebral hemisphere. Because of this only, in the history taking part, I mentioned that we have to take handedness of the patient. Then only we will know which is the dominant cerebral hemisphere. So, aphasia is an acquired disorder in the production or understanding of the language due to a lesion involving dominant cerebral hemisphere. In general, there can be two types of aphasia. One is expressive aphasia, which is related to the Broca's area, and a receptive aphasia, which is related to the Wernicke's area. Then aphasia testing. How would you test the aphasia is through a single language, in which we have to test the fluency, naming, comprehension, repetition, reading and writing skills. So with these 6 skills, we can recognize how much has gone wrong in relation to aphasia. Then apraxia. Apraxia is a defect in performance of a complex motor task. So this can be of 4 varieties. So ideomotor apraxia, ideational apraxia, constructional apraxia and dressing apraxia. So here there are some questions. See, you can see the example. How would you set the table for dinner? That is ideational apraxia. So inability to plan a series of complex tasks which the person or the patient was performing earlier, but now he is unable to perform. So next one is agnosia. Agnosia is a defect in recognizing a complex sensory stimulus. Here is performing. Apraxia is a defect in performance of a complex task, but agnosia is defect in recognizing a complex sensory stimulus. Okay, here also there are some types. Then coming to the memory test part of the mental state examination. Immediate memory, we classify the memory as immediate memory, recent memory, remote memory, verbal or visual memory, the other components. At this point of time, I want to say that we normally get confused with mental status examination and mini mental status examination. So there is a slight difference between those two, and we should not replace while we are speaking. So mini mental status examination, also called as Folstein test, is a 30-point questionnaire that is used extensively in clinical and research settings to measure cognitive impairment. It is commonly used in medicine and allied health to screen for dementia. So MSE, on the other hand, that is mental status examination, is an important part of clinical assessment process in neurological and psychiatric practice. So this is the major difference between mental status examination and mini mental status examination. So coming to this memory test, we have immediate memory, like we should ask the patient immediate memory, recent memory, remote memory. And causes of disorders of memory, there are some examples like post-traumatic amnesia or psychogenic amnesia. Then coming to the cognition part of mental status examination, We have 5 or 6 components even under this: orientation, memory, intellect, abstraction and judgment. And the last two parts of mental status examination are mood and affect. That mood refers to how the patient feels and affect refers to how the patient comes across to others. So mood is like subjective, and affect refers to how the other person perceives that patient. Then thought content. Abnormal thought content should be noted, including like hallucinations, paranoid behavior, loss of reality testing and evidence for psychosis. I think this is normally tested in while taking the candidates into military, because they give a situation and you have to react to that situation. So everyone has a different opinion to the same situation or different first replies to the same situation. So there your thought content is assessed. How you normally think, or which is the first reply that comes to your mind. Okay, so next I hope you understood the mental status examination part. So I'll just repeat that 5 things which we have to remember. So mental status examination includes level of alertness, focal cortical functioning, that we had 3: apraxia, agnosia and all. Then cognition, mood and affect and thought content. So I'll move on to cranial nerve examination now. So cranial nerve coming to the cranial nerve examination part. In the previous seminar, Ambika had explained that there are 12 cranial nerves, and which are all the parts from where they take the origin. So now moving on to the cranial nerve examination, each and every cranial nerve examination. So I hope you know the names of 12 cranial nerves. Then to be specific, 3rd and 4th cranial nerves are located in the midbrain. This is, I am repeating this because to localize the lesion, we should know from where the nerve is coming. So 3rd and 4th cranial nerves are located in the midbrain. 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th cranial nerves are located in the pons. 9th, 10th, 11th and 12th cranial nerves are located in the medulla oblongata. So as you know, there is some sensory aspect to some nerves, motor aspect to some nerves, and both are there. That is, mixed nerves are also there. So here is a typical diagram which is showing you which are all the sensory fibers and which are all the motor fibers. In olfactory, optic, we have purely the sensory fibers we have. And coming to the oculomotor, we have the motor component because it is showing purely the blue colored fibers. And then coming to the trochlear and the abducens, trochlear has the motor component and abducens also has the motor component. And coming to the trigeminal, sorry, the order is just misplaced there. So trigeminal, it has both sensory and the motor component. And the vestibulocochlear, it has the sensory component. Glossopharyngeal has motor and sensory. Then after the glossopharyngeal, the vagus nerve, it has motor and sensory component. Hypoglossal and accessory both have the motor component. So we have to remember which nerve has the sensory component and which nerve has the motor component and which has both, because while performing the examination it is important, because thinking that it is only sensory or only motor, we might skip the other part of the examination which is needed to be done under that cranial nerve. So there would be a simple mnemonic. You might have also studied this already. So some say marry money, but my brother says big brains matter more. So this would be a simple mnemonic. Where and all S comes, it is sensory. Where and all M comes, it is motor. And where and all B comes, it is both. So in the list of 12 cranial nerves, there are 3 cranial nerves in which there are both the components. One is the trigeminal, the 5th cranial nerve, and other one is the 7th cranial nerve, facial, and there might 4 mixed nerves. That is, one is trigeminal, facial, glossopharyngeal and the vagus nerve. So please keep that in mind, because when performing the examination we might miss out either on the sensory or on the motor part. So better to remember this. So now coming to the first cranial nerve, the olfactory nerve. Function is to carry the sensation of smell from nasal mucosa to the olfactory bulb. Then stimulus go to the periamygdaloid, prepiriform cortex, the uncus and the hippocampal gyrus. This nerve is tested by occluding the one nostril and presenting a non-volatile stimulus, that is like spices, coffee, like that, to the other nostril. Keep in mind, both the nostrils are not checked at once. It is single part of the nostril which is tested. So this is then repeated on the opposite side. So smell should always be evaluated after head trauma, because the olfactory nerve may be sheared off as it penetrates the cribriform plate. Basal meningiomas also cause a neurologic loss of smell by invading the cribriform plate. Remember that the most common cause of loss of smell is non-neurologic also, and it is due to the inflammation of nasal mucosa as seen with the upper respiratory infections. So how are we testing this? First thing we need to do is ask the patient to close his or her eyes, because we cannot perform when the patient keeps his eye open. So first step is always ask the patient to close his eyes. Small bottles of familiar odors are required. Then for example, here they have taken lemon. Then patient first sniffing through each nostril to show the airway is clear. Then the test odor is placed on one nostril while the other one is compressed. Then he or she is asked if he can smell anything or identify the odor. Then test is repeated using the other nostril and asked whether the odor is same in each nostril. So just not identifying the nostril, identifying the odor is important. It should be the same odor in both the nostrils. After some time, the test is repeated with other odor and asked if we can distinguish the different odors also. So it can be, there can be some pathology here. So what are all the things that can go wrong is results: those for whom each odor smells the same but unpleasant. In reality it is not unpleasant, but the to patient it seems as though it is unpleasant. So this condition is called as parosmia. It's better to remember these names, because while writing we cannot just write it as like the patient smells the odor different in each nostril. So parosmia is the term for that. Those who smell nothing in one or both the nostrils, or who sense much reduced on one sided compared to the another, this is said to be anosmia. Then so then coming to the second cranial nerve. So the second cranial nerve has, it also has some points that needs to be remembered. That is, it can be basically explained or tested in 4 components: visual acuity, visual field, color vision, pupillary reaction. So the visual acuity, coming to the first point, visual acuity. So the visual acuity, we have to have the Snellen chart with us. So in